Morning. Today we are continuing working with those graphs and interpreting our data. We are doing I can interpret and create histograms. Now a histogram looks very similar to a bar graph, but there are differences. So we need to really pay attention to the difference between a bar graph and a histogram. Histograms are a graph that displays data from a frequency table. A histogram shows the frequency or how often something happens. So remember, that's important to know what we use each graph for. The x-axis measures numbers instead of things like a bar graph does. So that x-axis, remember the x goes across, it's measuring numbers instead of birthday months, right? That's just labeling your months. On a histogram, it's going to represent numbers. Okay, it's measuring. So let's look at the difference between a bar graph and a histogram. So the bar graph, well, let's look at this. Measures quantity. Which one do you think measures the quantity? How much of something? This is the bar graph. The bar graph measures quantity. So what measures frequency? The histogram. So when we had our information about birthdays, who had their birthday months, whose birthday was in which month, that's the quantity. How many people had a birthday in February? How many people have a birthday in June? That's quantity. Frequency is how often something is happening. Bars are touching. Yeah. If we look at our pictures, this is a bar graph where you see there's space in between, they don't touch. I don't have it really showing down here, but you can see that histogram, they're actually touching. So in a histogram, bars touch. And in the bar graph, bars have equal space between them. It's a stomach gurgling, it's fine. So bar graph, there's spaces. Histogram, they're right next to each other. Now we have the x-axis values can be reordered. So that means it doesn't matter when we have injury types, if we put back injury, leg injury, needing stitches. One of our math packets had injury types. It doesn't matter the order that we put it in, right? Because you're still going to see the bar, how high it goes, to see how much went with it. So that means that the x-axis values can be reordered. So did we draw bar graphs for that math packet or a histogram? Bar graphs. So those x-axis values can be reordered. So they can be moved around. It doesn't matter where they are. You can still see the bar for how many back injuries there were, how many slips or falls or whatever the options were for that one. So that means x-axis cannot be reordered is the histogram. On the histogram, we have, it's measuring numbers. It's going in order. So that histogram has to stay in that specific order. Which one do you think the bars need to be the same width? So when we're looking at the bar graph example we have here, they look the same. When we look at the histogram, they look the same. One of them doesn't have to be the same, and that is, or one of them does have to be the same. That one comes first. So that is the histogram. Bars must be same width. So whenever you see a histogram, those bars have to be the same width across. A bar graph, the bars may or may not be the same width. So the histogram is a lot more specific. You have to put the x-axis in order. You have to have the bars touching. You have to have the bars be the same size. So that histogram is a lot more specific. So that's the differences. They kind of look the same, but there are big differences between them. And you need to understand that. So let's scroll up. We have our bar graph and our histogram. So on our bar graph here, it's residential property sales by location. So we have the numbers of properties going up, how many properties there are, and we have the locations. Okay. So we have Manchester and Stockport and Wigan and Safford and Trafford. Does it matter which place we put the different locations? No, the bar's still going to be the same, right? We could put, I can't read that. Is that Boston? We could put Boston in front of Manchester and it would still be the same height of a bar. It doesn't mess anything up. But if we look at the histogram, this is the distribution of property sales from January 2013 to September of 2019. So going up, it's the number of properties. So both of them have the number of properties. But on the bottom, this is the sale price. So our sale price has to start off from low, going in order up to high. It doesn't make sense if we jumble up our sale prices. So it has to be in order from 500, is that 550? 50. I don't know what that is in front of it. It's hard to read on here. So I've got 50 all the way up to 2,500, and that sales price is in the thousands. So 2,500,000, 50,000. We're going in order as we go up. They are touching, and our bars are the same size. But those prices have to be in order going across. It only makes sense because we have those numbers on the bottom. They have to stay in order. Are we understanding the differences between the histogram and the bar? That histogram is showing the frequency, how often. How often did we have houses that sold for these different amounts? Let's look at our second page. Answer the questions about the histogram. So you need to look at your numbers, noticing again, the grades on the quiz go in order. How many people, number of people, so how many people scored 40 on the quiz? Oh, hold on. It's not how many people scored 40. Look carefully at that graph. What is it, Marina?
Between 40 and 50.
Very good. It's how many people scored between 40 and 50. So you could have scored 44, you could have scored 49, you could have scored 47. You're still going to be in that 40 to 50 range. Then we have how many people scored between 50 and 60 points. It's that range. How many scored between 60 and 70? How many scored between 70 and 80? How many scored between 80 and 90? And how many scored between 90 and 100? So it's a range. They call it an interval. That interval is that range. From 80 to 90 is an interval. From 50 to 60 is an interval. But not in the middle of a lesson, no. So you're going to have to answer these questions looking at the different intervals on our histogram. Cameron, your eyes should be up here, hon. Now it says create a histogram from the following frequency tables. Just like with our box and whisker, let's set it up together. You're going to finish it on your own, but we're going to set it up together. What do I need to start? Thinking about graphs. Jimena? I need my x-axis and I need my y-axis. What am I going to put on the x-axis? Oh, and you know what? There are two different frequency tables. So let's do our first table over here. You're going to do the second table all on your own. But I'm going to help us start out with that first table. What should I put on that x-axis? What was that? The height. So I'm going to label it height. And then I'm going to put my heights in order across the bottom. So I'm going to have 1.34 to 1.39. Then I have 1.40 to 1.45, 1.46 to 1.51. I'm just taking it right from here. 1.52 to 1.57, 1.58 to 1.63, and 1.64 to 1.69. So I'm taking it straight from here. Each of these is my heading, my labeling for my histogram on the x-axis, and I have to keep them in order. So what am I going to put on the y-axis? Yeah, if I put height on the x, I'm going to put frequency on the y, and I'm going to label it. And then, just like I went up with my, on the bar graph when I went up the y-axis, sometimes we have to skip count, right? Because we're going from 0 to 31 is our highest. So goodness, I don't have enough room to write all the way up to 31 counting by ones. So I'm going to skip count by 5s on this one. So 0's on the bottom, and I have 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 35. Making sense how we set up our histogram? Very similar to how we set up the bar graph. Just making sure we're keeping them in order for that x-axis. Now, we have to draw our bars. So for the 1.34 to 1.39, what is my frequency? How high up do I want to make that bar? Somebody said, say it louder. to 4. So there's a frequency of 4, so I'm going to go up just below that 5, and I'm going to make my bar. And notice how I made it go all the way out. So I'm going to be touching the next bar. I'm not making it skinny because histograms, we want to touch our bars. So for my second interval, 1.40 to 1.45, how high up do I want to go? Up to 14. So I'm going to go just below that 15. I'm going to come down so the bars are touching. And I'm going to try my hardest to make my bars the same width. We're not going to pull out rulers and be very exact. We're going to try really hard to make them look to be the same width. 1.46 to 1.51. How high up do I have to go for that one? 31. So I'm going to go way up here. Making sure that my bars touch. I'm not leaving that gap. You've got 3 more you need to finish on your own. Then you need to do your own histogram for the class and frequency. So you need to do your own over here for class and frequency, making sure we have labels, making sure we're putting the right things on the X and Y axis. If it's the X axis, it has to be in that order. From 1 to 11, from 12 to 22, your intervals need to go in order. Then you're going to do your review on the bottom, do that 5 number summary. If you forgot what the 5 numbers are, look back at our last objective on that box and whisker plot and write those 5 different things that you need. You remember the minimum and the maximum and the median. So you're going to write those out, all 5 of them. Any questions? When you are finished, we have Khan Academy due tomorrow. It's due on Thursdays. We have our math packet that's due on Friday. So we have a lot to work on. If you want to ask questions about any of these graphs, come ask me questions. We have tomorrow's, we're doing circle graphs, and then next week it's review, practice, test, and test. So Monday is the review, Tuesday is the practice test, Wednesday is the test. So make sure you're understanding these graphs. Make sure you understand what we use the different graphs for. At that top of every objective, why would we use that graph to show what? And remember I said Monday, I will do a review group at 2:30 as long as you can hang in Mrs. Gregory's room while I'm in student council. If you are watching this at home, I hope you are well, and I hope to see you soon. Have a wonderful day.